Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
This story happened about 20 years ago when I was 12. Now I'm 32, and it still shocks me. It was December 26th, 1999. My mom, brother, sister, and I went after Christmas shopping to find deals on returned items. We never got everything we wanted on Christmas, so this shopping trip became our family tradition. We went to a huge supercenter called Big Blue. My younger brother stayed with my mom. My sister and I got some money to buy what we wanted, and were told to meet mom in the electronics section when finished. My sister went to look at dolls, while I headed to electronics. I wanted to see if any Sega Dreamcasts were on sale. The store was packed with shoppers hunting for deals. People pushed carts filled with discounted Christmas decorations and returned gifts. The electronics section had a line of customers waiting to check out video games and movies. I asked the cashier if I could see the last Dreamcast they had behind the glass. The cashier told me I needed my parents to buy it. My mom walked up with my sister and brother. She told the cashier she was my mother and it was okay for me to get the console. I jumped with joy as the guy took out the Dreamcast. Then a kid snatched the box and ran to his mother. He asked if he could get the Dreamcast. His mother told him he could have whatever he wanted. The cashier looked annoyed. He told the woman he had been getting the box for me. He pointed at me while I was almost crying. The kid just said it was his. The mother said her son deserved it more than me and used a racial slur. My mom asked if she heard right. The woman said more racist things about how we didn't belong in the country. Several other shoppers nearby stopped and stared. An elderly man shook his head in disgust at the woman's words. A store manager walking by slowed down to listen to the exchange. My sister almost threw something at the woman, but my mom stopped her. The mother told her son they were leaving. My mom threatened the woman, telling her to give back the Dreamcast. The cashier told the woman to leave without the Dreamcast. He explained it was first come, first serve, and her son took it from his hands. I looked at my mom hopefully, and she smiled, patting my head. The mother agreed to leave but said she'd complain to corporate. She told her son to put down the box. The cashier gave the Dreamcast to me and we went to the checkout. We browsed through a few more aisles before heading to the front. My mom found a discounted winter coat for my brother. My sister picked up some art supplies that were 40% off. While waiting in line, I felt something twist my foot badly. I screamed. My mom turned to check on me. The same mother from before said, "Sorry," without meaning it. She told her son to grab the Dreamcast box now on the floor. She yelled for help dramatically. The shopping cart she rammed into my ankle had been pushed with force. The metal edge cut through my sock and left a small bleeding wound along with the sprain. My new shoes were scuffed from the impact. My mom checked my ankle, then walked to the woman and punched her hard. I heard a crack. My mom yelled for someone to call the police because this woman had run down her son with a cart. The woman threw more racist insults at us, even saying people like us should be killed. Bad thing to say in a store full of black shoppers that day. The store security guard rushed over with his radio already calling for backup. The store manager announced a code over the intercom and 2 more employees arrived quickly. They formed a barrier between my family and the hostile woman. Another cashier asked the woman if she had attacked a child. The mother tried to leave, saying she made a mistake and then was attacked. The cashier told her to wait for the police. The woman asked why she should wait when she did nothing wrong. Her son dropped the Dreamcast and started crying. The mother blamed us and asked for money because we scared her son. Mom picked up the Dreamcast and put it in our cart. The store manager offered me a chair and a cup of water. He apologized for the incident happening in his store. He told my mom the security cameras had captured everything. We waited for police and an ambulance. The medical worker said my ankle was only sprained. The police officer told my mom the woman would go to jail for child abuse and endangerment. He asked if there was anything else to add. Mom mentioned the racist comments. The officer said he would include that. 3 witnesses came forward to give statements to the police. They confirmed hearing the racial slurs and seeing the deliberate cart attack. The security footage clearly showed her aiming the cart at my leg. The mother was arrested for child abuse, child endangerment, assault, battery, and resisting arrest. They tased her twice. Her son was taken by Child Protective Services until his father could be contacted. He looked scared and confused as they led him away. I got my Dreamcast and a sprained ankle. The store manager gave us a $50 gift card and a 10% discount on our purchases. He insisted we take his business card in case we needed anything else. 2 weeks later, we received a formal apology letter from the corporate office. My mom was called to testify at the woman's trial 3 months later. The woman was sentenced to 18 months probation and mandatory anger management classes. My mom was my hero that day. I wanted to drive after leaving active duty service on a ship. In 1999, I got a job delivering meat in Southern California. The job was tough with traffic and tight schedules of 16 to 20 deliveries each day to local markets. I mostly had inner-city routes with markets that had limited space for mid-sized delivery trucks. One weekly stop was a small market owned by an Iraqi immigrant. His place was usually my 5th or 6th stop, so I'd arrive after 9 a.m. He always complained about me showing up late. He complained about my arrival time, saying I always came after 9 and it was unacceptable. I told him I started my route at 6:15 and his store didn't open until 8 a.m. I explained I didn't make the schedule and if he wanted to be first, he needed to contact our delivery supervisor. He said he paid good money and should be first. When he asked who the supervisor was, I told him it was our delivery route supervisor and he needed to talk to him about changing his delivery position. The next week I got instructions. Make sure this market is your first delivery of the day. I had about 18 stops that day and they'd all be pushed back by at least 2 hours because he wouldn't open until 8 a.m. and his rear delivery door wouldn't be accessible until later. But orders were orders. I started driving at my usual time and got to his market 15 minutes later. The place was closed. I parked and waited. At 8, he showed up. He drove his Mercedes around the back of my truck, parked, and went inside through the back door. I waited for him to open the front doors, but he ignored me. Through the window, I saw him supervising the cashier, avoiding eye contact. I went inside and headed to the meat counter. The worker there told me he wasn't allowed to accept deliveries and I had to wait for the owner. I could have left to make other deliveries and come back, but my instructions were clear. This market had to be first. As I walked to the exit, I grabbed a newspaper, paid for it, and told the owner to let me know when he was ready and that he knew where I was parked. He said nothing. It seemed like he was taking revenge because his small market wasn't the priority for a meat distributor that delivered from many distribution points across the United States. I went back to my truck and waited for hours. The morning sun beat down on my truck as I sat there. I watched other delivery drivers come and go to neighboring businesses. They honked and waved as they passed, confused about why I was just sitting there. I called 2 other drivers on my route and warned them I'd be extremely late for our usual meetup at the taco stand. Our supervisor arrived at his desk after 10 a.m. He saw an alert showing my truck sitting for over 4 hours. He called me and asked what was happening and why my truck hadn't moved for 4 hours. I told him I was following his instructions to make this market my first delivery, but the owner wasn't ready yet. He hung up. 5 minutes later, the owner came out of his market. The owner said I called the supervisor on him and it was disrespectful. I told him I hadn't called anyone. The supervisor called me asking why my truck hadn't moved. He told me to bring the delivery right away. I unloaded his order, about 14 boxes of product. The meat was still within safe temperature range, but barely. This was another reason we scheduled deliveries strategically. Food safety depended on timing. After finishing, I rushed through my other stops. 3 customers complained about my late arrival, and 1 refused their delivery entirely because their lunch rush had already started. That meant I had to haul those products back to the warehouse and fill out spoilage forms. Even so, I was the last driver back to the warehouse that night. The warehouse manager looked at my truck thermometer logs and shook his head. He told me the company lost money on today's route because of the delays and refused delivery. I got an extra $80 in overtime pay because of this situation. The following week, his market was no longer on my route. When I asked about it, someone from the office hinted that some customers weren't worth the trouble. I found out later that our supervisor had calculated the actual cost of making that market first every day. Between overtime, fuel for the idling truck, spoilage risks, and lost customers, it would cost the company over $2,000 each month. I never saw that market on our delivery routes again. We dropped him as a customer. 2 months later, I drove past and saw a for lease sign in the window. A competing meat supplier had also dropped him after similar demands. The world doesn't revolve around entitled people, especially in delivery where time is money. This is my first post about how I stood up to an entitled assistant manager at the gas station where I worked. I was 20 years old and had moved to a new state. I needed the job quickly, and the local gas station was hiring. The job was good, and my first manager, Angel, made the workplace welcoming. She was sweet. When Angel was around, everything ran smoothly. But then there was the assistant manager, Richard. Richard was a nightmare. When Angel wasn't around, he became hostile, creepy, and would dump his work on us. Then, when we couldn't finish everything fast enough, he blamed us for being lazy. My co-workers and I had reported him to higher-ups many times. Angel wanted to help but couldn't do anything about Richard. The situation reached a breaking point for me 2 months after I started. I'm autistic and timid. I get stressed when someone threatens me, to the point where I feel sick and struggle to breathe. This played a role in what happened next. On this day, I had asked my co-worker, Cross, if I could borrow his speaker to listen to music during shifts. Angel approved it as long as I could still work at the register, and Cross was fine with me borrowing it until my new speaker arrived. When shift change happened, Richard came in. He noticed me listening to music and told me to play his music from his phone on the speaker. I said no, explaining that the speaker was mine for the next few days, and I didn't want to be responsible for damage. Richard had a history of breaking other people's belongings and never taking responsibility. Just last week, he had dropped another co-worker's phone and cracked the screen, then claimed it was already damaged. He whispered, just loud enough for me to hear but quiet enough that the store cameras wouldn't pick it up, that he had a knife. This wasn't the first time he had made veiled threats. Last month, he told a female co-worker he knew where she lived when she refused to cover his shift. Fear and determination hit me at once. I thought quickly and made a plan to end his behavior. I yelled loud enough for the cameras to pick up, asking why he was threatening me with a knife. Richard backed away. He tried to calm me down, saying it was just a joke and I should chill out. His face had gone pale. I told him he could have fun working alone because I quit. Before I left, I made sure to call a district emergency line that we were supposed to use for store emergencies. I reported that I was leaving the store due to threats of violence from the assistant manager. I walked out, called my mother, who lived nearby, and told her what happened in tears after the fear wore off. She told me to call my manager, so I did and explained everything. I also mentioned that I knew Richard had a knife because I had seen a pocket knife with his name on it in the office. Richard kept that knife hidden in his desk drawer, wrapped in a handkerchief. I had accidentally discovered it while looking for the store's extra receipt paper. My mom took me back to the store to talk with my manager. On the drive over, she reminded me that I had rights as an employee and that Richard's behavior was completely unacceptable. When we arrived, I was in a meeting with my manager, the branch manager, and the district manager. The security team had already pulled the footage from that day and the previous weeks. The manager asked what had happened. I told him everything. I said I didn't feel safe. I described how Richard had been harassing my co-workers and verbally assaulting us. I told them how he would frequently make inappropriate comments about female customers when they left the store. I told them he had just threatened me with a knife because I refused to let him use a borrowed speaker. I also mentioned the incident with the female co-worker and the threat about knowing where she lived. They asked about the speaker, so I called Cross, who confirmed I had permission to borrow it. He also backed up my claims about Richard's past behavior. While on the call, Cross revealed that Richard had once followed him to his car after work to intimidate him about a scheduled change. The police were called. They checked the security footage and heard me yelling about the knife. They also searched Richard's locker and found the customized pocket knife with his initials engraved on it. I later found out that Richard had been fired from his previous job. The HR department from his former workplace contacted our district office with additional information about his pattern of behavior. A few months later, I learned that Richard had been arrested for threatening physical harm to a disabled person, sexual harassment, sexual assault, and unauthorized concealed weapon. The police investigation uncovered that he had been using the gas station's computer to send inappropriate messages to younger employees. He wanted to use a speaker, but in the end, he got several kinds of speakers, the kind that stand at podiums in courtrooms, and put him in jail about a week after the incident. The police reviewed the security footage where I mentioned the knife, and that started the investigation into his background, which revealed his previous offenses. After the incident, the gas station implemented new safety protocols for all employees. Management installed panic buttons under the counters and required 2 people on every shift. Angel personally called me 3 weeks later to offer me my job back with increased pay and a flexible schedule. I worked there for another year before moving on to a better opportunity. I was a good student, honor roll, extracurriculars, the whole package. My parents were proud, and I worked hard to keep it that way. But sometimes my school took advantage of students in ways that crossed lines. My private high school was expensive, like second mortgage on the house expensive, yet somehow they never seemed to have enough money. Every month brought a new fundraiser, chocolate sales, car washes, auction galas. It was exhausting, but this particular fundraiser was on another level of inappropriate. My English teacher told us about it on a Monday morning, her voice cheerful as if offering us a treat instead of an obligation. She told the class about their newest fundraising initiative, explaining that we'd each write a letter to our grandparents asking them to donate to the school fund. She added that this would count as 15% of our grade for the quarter. The class went silent. I raised my hand and asked if this assignment was mandatory. She confirmed that it absolutely was, saying it was an important assignment that taught persuasive writing while supporting our school community. I asked what would happen if we didn't have grandparents to write to. She smiled, that practice smile teachers use when they think you're trying to get out of work. She told me that I could write to other relatives instead, adding that the important thing was reaching out to family members who might support our school. I didn't push it further in class, but this assignment bothered me deeply. My family situation wasn't something I talked about much. My dad's parents had both died before I was born. My mom's father passed away when I was 7. My remaining grandmother had developed severe dementia and lived in a care facility where she rarely recognized anyone, let alone understood financial matters. When I got home, I told my parents about the assignment. My dad asked if they were really making me do this for a grade. My mom called it inappropriate and said she'd call the school the next day. I asked them not to, saying I didn't want to make a big deal about it. My parents agreed to let me handle it my way, though they were upset. The next day, I talked to my teacher after class. I told her I wanted to talk about the grandparent letter assignment, explaining that I didn't have grandparents I could send this to. I told her that 3 of them had passed away and my remaining grandmother had severe dementia. She said she was sorry but reminded me that I could write to another relative instead. I told her that I didn't have other relatives who would donate and that my parents already paid full tuition. She insisted that everyone needed to complete this assignment and suggested I could write to a family friend. Her dismissive tone made something snap inside me. I was a straight A student being forced to beg for money for a grade. It felt wrong and exploitative. I told her I'd figure something out. That night, I stared at my blank paper, getting angry. The school was already getting thousands in tuition from my parents. Now they wanted me to manipulate elderly relatives into giving more, and they were holding my grade hostage to ensure compliance. That's when I had my idea. I looked up the address of Oak Ridge Cemetery, where my maternal grandmother was buried. She had been my favorite person, kind, funny, and always supportive of my education. I wrote her address down on the envelope form we were required to use. Then I wrote a letter that followed all the requirements. I described the school's opportunities and how they were shaping young minds. I asked if she would consider supporting this institution that means so much to me. At the end, I added a personal note saying I loved her and hoped she was doing well over there. It was accurate, if a bit morbid in context. The next day, I turned in my letter with the rest of the class. The teacher collected them all with a smile, not looking at the addresses. 2 weeks later, she told us about the fundraiser's success. She thanked us for our letters, saying we'd raised over $15,000 for the new athletic equipment and told everyone they would get full credit for the assignment. I got my 100% and thought that was the end of it. But about a month later, I got a call from the school office. The administrator asked me to come to the office to discuss something. When I arrived, the office administrator was holding a familiar-looking envelope. She told me they had received returned mail, and there was a problem with the address I provided for my grandparent letter. The envelope had "Return to sender, deceased," stamped across it in red. Someone at the cemetery had opened it, realized what it was, and sent it back. I told her that yes, my grandmother had passed away, and I didn't have anyone else to send it to. The administrator asked why I hadn't told my teacher. I told her that I had, but she insisted I needed to complete the assignment anyway. The administrator looked uncomfortable and said she would look into it. Nothing ever came of it directly, but the next semester, the grandparent fundraising letter was gone from the curriculum. My only regret is that Oak Ridge Cemetery probably still gets the school's monthly newsletter. I hope my grandmother would have liked my small act of rebellion. She always did have a mischievous sense of humor. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.